Hello everyone, it's Tuesday again, it's September 27th, 2011, it's Harp Tuesday. And today I thought I would start a two-episode look at muffling and dampening on the harp. One of the wonderful things about the harp is also one of the challenging things about the harp, and that is its resonance. When you play a string, it just keeps vibrating and producing sound for a long time unless it's actually stopped. It just keeps ringing and ringing and ringing. And not only is a particular string producing sound, but there's sympathetic vibration. So that if you play a chord, muffle those strings, there's still all that sound going on as the other strings are vibrating in sympathy. So there's all this wonderful sound, but sometimes there can be too much sound. And it can be, imagine playing everything on the piano with a sustain pedal down. Sometimes that's an effect you want, but sometimes that would just be enough to drive you crazy. It would get too muddy. So I'm going to talk about different ways that you can get rid of some of that sound. And today I'm going to talk about open octaves and open notes with the left hand. And then in the next episode, I'll talk about some of the things you can do with the right hand and just some of the things you can do overall to try to reduce the amount of sound that, to the extent that it gets too muddy or just too much going on. So hope you enjoy. So I'm going to try this camera angle, which of course doesn't let me really talk directly into the camera, but hopefully will give you a good view of what's happening with my left hand. So open octaves are used pretty much any time that you have an octave in the left hand, especially the lower it gets. We could play an octave the normal way, where your 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 are just hanging down there loosely, and close the fingers into the palm. Maybe a little wrist movement as well, moving the knuckles up and away. But if we have a bunch of them down here, that sound that gets created, it gets quite muddy. Not to mention, of course, that there's all the sympathetic vibration that's happening down there as well. So that's why we'll use open octaves, because that allows you to muffle all the surrounding notes sort of at the same time as you play a particular octave. And it starts by just placing your hand on the strings. You're going to put your thumb, so if we're playing this C octave, you're going to put your thumb ready to play. So your thumb's on the string, and your hand is just against the strings. So it muffles all these strings, stops them ringing. And now you can use either 4 or 3 to play. Normally we would use 4. For me, because my hands are fairly large, I find it easier to do an open octave with 3. You may find it easier to do it with 4. Just experiment what seems most comfortable for you. The smaller your hand size, probably the more likely you are that you'll want to use 4. I'm going to demonstrate with 3 first. So what happens is you've placed your hand on the string, you've muffled all the surrounding notes, and now you're going to play this octave. The thumb is a similar movement to what we would have if we were playing it normally, in that it's mainly this part of the joint that's creating a lot of the force. It's not just this first knuckle, but it's the lower knuckle that's helping move the thumb and create the sound. And then with our, in this case, third finger, we're going to start by coming away from the string. So we've muffled, come away from the string, and play, so that the angle of attack for the third finger, instead of this, what we would normally have, something that's, pointing down somewhat, we're basically going to be parallel to the string really feel very peculiar. If I do that with my right hand, which isn't accustomed to playing open octaves, it's very strange. But with practice, it gets quite normal. So you muffled, you come away, and you play. See how much cleaner that is? You're able to muffle those surrounding notes, and depending on what you want, you can have it be staccato or somewhat legato. In other words, you can replace quite a bit before you play so that you hear each note as being quite sharp and staccato and cut off, or you can muffle and play almost at the same time. So that you're almost achieving a legato sound. You still hear it getting cut off a little bit, but it's much smoother as compared to. So let's do this with 4 now. Again, it's the same idea. You've placed your hand, you start to come away and prepare to play. So these fingers are still open. They're not dropping down to where they normally would be, because there's not enough time often to go from muffling to a normal position, which is why we do this sort of weird open playing. So that's the basics of open octaves. Now you can, of course, use this. It's, for example, if you play this note, this octave, and then you play the C, you will muffle this G naturally, because that's in the range of where your hand is muffling. But this bottom note is going to keep ringing. So you can also sort of muffle and sneak up, so that I play this, I muffle and move my hand up to grab this C. And similarly, if we're going back down, I could muffle and slide back down and grab this. It's easier sliding up, and generally that's the more necessary, because the higher the notes you get, the shorter amount of time that they will ring. So it's generally more important to stop this ringing than this. So open octaves are a great way to cover up some of the sound and make sure that it's just that most recent chord that's sounding. And we can use that same technique to do just open-handed notes with our thumb, so that, for example, let's say maybe we've just played a chord, and now we're going to play this E. And normally, as a single note, we would just play that with 2. That's the sort of convention. Or maybe we connected. But there's a lot of sound that's still going on. So in some pieces, what we would want to do is having played this, or whatever chord it is, and now we're going to play this E, we'll play it as an open thumb. And that's very similar to an open octave, so that the hand gets placed to muffle, the thumb's in position to play, and it's just the same as if we were playing an open octave, except we're not playing the lower note. in your music, if someone specifically wants this, it'll generally be marked with 1 for the thumb and then a plus symbol above it, or just sometimes just the plus symbol indicating this open-handed playing. And again, you can make them staccato by muffling in advance of playing, or legato by sneaking in and playing at the last moment as you muffle. And so this is obviously 2 great ways to just try to reduce some of the sound. And again, I'll just do this fairly slowly, this thumb movement. So when you start with the hand against the strings, but when you actually go to play it, you're moving the hand a little bit away, because if the whole hand were to stay here, there's not only does that string get covered, but even if you maybe kept it like this, it's very awkward. There's not much room to move. So the hand is going to move away from the strings enough to give you room to play the thumb and or to play that lower either 4 or 3. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of open-handed octaves. And as I say, next episode I'm going to talk about some of the other techniques which you can do with the right hand, for example, because with the right hand the harp is in the way. It's hard to do these open notes. So you'll do stuff like using the second finger to muffle as it replaces, and also just look at some of the general things you can be thinking about as you're working on a piece to just make sure that there's not too much sound that's happening. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you again in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.